I'm Enari Dark Lore, and welcome to Churikua. Tonight, on our first compilation from the third season, we will listen to the legends of La Pascualita, Linares Palace, Borgvattnet Vicarage, and El Tío from the Mine. And remember that the night awaits for you. So many sleepless nights, so many nightmares that come to my mind every night, ever since that day, driven by the desire to work on something that would excite every woman, something related to the best day of our lives after the birth of our children, our wedding day. It's worth nothing than back then. Our priorities were family and children, and most of us didn't have dreams as big as we do today. In my case, I loved watching women try on wedding dresses, seeing the look of happiness on their faces, or helping them to find the perfect one. Here, in Chihuahua, there was a wedding dress shop that we would call a boutique nowadays, that started as a modest store and gradually gained prestige. Doña Pascuala, the owner, was the one who started it, and it was so successful, reaching a point where there were dresses for every taste and every, or almost every, budget, living up to its name, La Popular. Unfortunately, just the year before I arrived at the store, that tragedy happened. One that left its mark not only on the store's history but also on that of the entire city. Doña Pascuala's daughter was about to get married, but just before the wedding, she was stung by a poisonous scorpion, causing her to die and preventing her from reaching the altar. She was buried in her wedding dress by mutual agreement between Doña Pascuala and the man who would have been her husband. Shortly after her death, a beautiful mannequin arrived at the store from France. As I heard from someone in Doña Pascuala's family, it was sent by a bride who had been so enchanted by her wedding dress that, after entering the business herself, she had the mannequin made in her daughter's likeness. A daughter who had made the young French woman stay so pleasant back when she was of marriageable age. Rumors spread quickly as seeing her in the widowed. Rumors spread quickly as seeing her in the display, beautiful, and the spitting image of her was something few could resist. To be honest, that's what I came to believe when I saw her too. It was said that Doña Pascualas hadn't buried her daughter, but had embalmed her, and there she was, wearing beautiful wedding dresses that did nothing but highlight her beauty in a lifeless way. Little by little, I got used to it and began to enjoy my job, until one day everything changed. I had switched afternoon shift, so it was my turn to close up. That was a really tough day. I had to help a bride who took a long time to decide on a dress. After trying on more than 10, she finally chose one and was very happy. But the store had to close right then. As soon as she left, I started to close up the shop, and I couldn't help but glance at the mannequin to make sure everything was in order. But to my surprise, I saw it blink and then smile. I couldn't believe my eyes. I wanted to assume it was just the exhaustion from what had been a very hectic day. I didn't think much of it until the next day, a quieter day, when something similar happened. I closed up and, As I stepped out onto the street, I saw her turn her face slightly toward me and make a gesture with her hands. It was if, with the stiffness in her hands, she was doing everything she could to say goodbye to me, but I couldn't bear it. The next morning, I did everything I could to convince Doña Pascuala to switch my shift again. And when I described what had happened, she agreed. Unfortunately, my stay there wasn't very long. I lasted only a few more months until I managed to find another job at a clothing store. Not as emotional, but similar in some ways. The last thing I remember after my final day, there was walking out, and as I gave thanks for such a wonderful experience, I saw Pascualita for the last time. This time with an expression or perhaps an attempt at unease, as if she felt guilty that I had left. But that was the last time I went there. Until recently, when I passed by it again, since years without it, and I'm proud to know that it's still in business. Thought this time without Pascualita welcoming guest from the display. The most beautiful palaces are those that seem to hold the greatest secrets or mysteries. Within their walls, there is a glimmer of doubt that has been echoing in my mind, something that hasn't stopped since my visit. I have to tell you how a simple visit to Madrid made me feel as if I were in a hypnotic trance, drawn to visit that palace. From my earliest years, my parents left Spain and we lived in different countries, returning only for short periods to visit our family. In the 80s, I remember passing by and seeing the splendor of the Linares palace, walking around it, but no matter how much I asked, it was just an empty palace that no one lived in. However, something caught my attention once. I saw what looked like a woman in clothes from another era, peering out the window, fading away like smoke. I got scared and tried to tell my parents what I'd seen, but they just replied that it must have been someone in charge of the palace, or that they were most likely filming a movie by a director named Luis Garcia Berlanga, and it was likely that some people were taking the opportunity to get an autograph and spend a brief moment with some of the celebrities involved. I decided to simply forget about that incident until the 90s. During yet another visit to see the family, there was a talk of audio recordings of a girl crying for her mother. This left me with more doubts, and I ended up at the gates of the Linares Palace waiting for information. But, as was to be expected, security at the property had been tightened in the wake of the media storm that had just broken. I ended up feeling bewildered, sitting in a library waiting to learn more about it. My mind swirling with a kind of commotion that wouldn't go away. And the vague memory of the silhouette I had seen. The palace, whose construction began in 1877 by order of José de Murga y Relit, first Marquis of Linares and Viscount of Llanteno, after he purchased the estate in 1872, a man born into a more modest circumstances but no less significant, having amassed his fortune through his family's inheritance and his sound judgment in investing in the railroad business and various other ventures in Cuba. He and his wife, Raimunda de Osorio y Ortega, spent their lives together building the palace, into which they moved in 1884, even though it was not yet finished. It was to be expected that there would be some social pressure given that their deep love for another had not produced any children. Unfortunately, they were barely able to enjoy their palace, which was completed in 1900s, as they passed away in 1901 and 1902. What was not known until much later, and this was thanks to the psychophonic recordings as local media reported, was that Don José de Murga had fallen in love with a young woman of humble origins from Lavapiés, the daughter of a cigarette seller, and that his father had forbidden him for marrying her. He was sent to receive a privileged education in Germany, France, and London. Upon completing his studies and following the deaths of his parents in 1857 and one of his brothers, Joaquin, in March 1858, he returned to Spain, reunited with Raimunda, his former love, and with no obstacles in their way, they were married in June 1858. This is curious to note how Eduardo, Don José Murga's other brother, supported his brother in his desire to marry Doña Raimunda, and how Eduardo himself passed away in November 1858, just a few months after they were married. It is also said that they found a letter stating that Raimunda was illegitimate daughter of Mateo, Don José's father, and that for his reason they should avoid marrying. Because they love each other so deeply, they received a papal bull decreeing that they could continue living together as long as they did not consummate their marriage. The media reports that they had a daughter, a little girl whom everyone called Raimundita, who, burdened by her parents' tragic fate, took her own life. Some say in one of the palace fountains, others that she was locked in a room until she died of starvation, and they grieved and loved each other until they left this world. First, Doña Raimunda on October 28, 1901, and then Don José himself on April 9, 1902. Some said it was due to a lung disease, while others claimed that was the excuse given to hide the fact that he took his own life with a pistol. Now, I've gone across a great opportunity to take a tour of the palace, something that has always fascinated me. I just saw that silhouette pass by on the second floor of the palace again. So, yes, I'm going to go inside now that it's open to the public for what will be its final tour. No one believed me back then, and I'm sure no one will believe me now. But I have to see it for myself, to ask about those who live in this palace. Could it be that the marquises are suffering for their own fall by having no descendants? Or is it true, as the gossip says, that they were capable of killing their own child to save face? Perhaps. I'll never know. But what I do know is that I want to explore the palace that has called to me ever since I first laid eyes on it. You come to me afraid and fearful that I won't understand you. Our Lord offers us comfort, strength, and fortitude. Yet, there is so much in this world that even I find difficult to understand at my age. God's purpose on allowing spirits to linger and wander in a single place. When I was young, I was sent to Borgvattnet Vicarage in Jamland, more precisely in Rekunda. It was a very quiet and peaceful place. I had only just finished my training for this vocation, but my time there not only taught me many things, but also revealed the darkest side of human suffering, leading me to reflect on how our Lord allows so much suffering in this world. As far as I know, it was built in 1876. I came to live there in 1945. It was modest, humble, and had everything necessary to live comfortably there. The congregation was attentive and simple. Everything went peacefully, at least in daily life, until to my surprise I began to hear doors slamming. I assume I hadn't closed them properly and the wind had caused them to slam shut. Then I hear what sounded like heavy furniture being moved or dragged, but I couldn't believe it because my furniture hadn't arrived yet. I figured it was just my imagination, so I tried to focus more on helping others and on my congregation. Helping others always filled me with peace, but my inner peace was weaving. God was testing me, as the most intense part was about to happen. I remember when I started hearing sobs, a woman crying. I assumed it was someone who needed comfort, but there was no one there. I just calmed myself down and decided to go about my business. The following night, it happened again. I heard footsteps, as if someone were climbing the stairs. I thought someone might be in danger, but there was no one there. Something wasn't right, so I knelt down and began to pray until everything calmed down. A couple more nights went by like that until once again, late at night, I heard a woman and her son crying inconsolably. I grew worried and assumed something terrible had happened to them. I jumped out of the bed in a hurry and imagined my surprise when I peeked out the window. There was no one, absolutely no one outside the house. I hurried downstairs, thinking maybe it was someone who needed help and was waiting inside, but there was nothing. I sat in the living room, picked up the Bible, and looked for a passage that would bring me comfort, but unfortunately, no matter which verse I read, it couldn't bring me the calm I needed. So there I was, once again, praying and pleading for answers, deciding to keep a notebook to record everything that had happened. And so quiet, peaceful weeks passed, at least within my home, since there was always something: funerals, weddings, ceremonies to officiate, always knocking at my door, or in cases of utmost importance, they would arrive and wait for me in the living room, in case I didn't answer the door and it was something of utmost urgency. I enjoyed that time helping those who needed me, since it was a small place, and aside from helping others and focusing on my duties as a vicar, there wasn't much else to do. The period of calm lasted relatively little, since once again, at night, I would wake up in the early hours to sobbing and crying of both a woman and her baby. It was if they were in a room next to mine. I searched and searched without success until, in a dream, I saw another vicar from another time with dirt on his clothes and a shovel coming from the courtyard. I woke up in a hurry, frightened, asking God if this was the answer to my questions, if He was telling me something about what was here. I went downstairs and sat in my rocking chair. I decided to calm down and read a book, but in the middle of reading, I felt as if someone were pushing me very hard out of the rocking chair. They pushed me so hard that I fell to the floor. I didn't understand what was happening, so I simply got up, picked up my book, and decided to sit back down. But for some reason, I felt as thought someone was preventing me from sitting down, and I saw the rocking chair swaying on its own, as if someone were using it. From that moment on, I decided never to sit in it again. Shortly after that, I would hear footsteps coming from the garden, as if someone were there. They would blow out my candles. I would even hear what sounded like people coming from the wooden bridge. Thought no one ever arrived. Somehow, I gradually got used to it. Going to the expedition room was difficult, as I felt as if someone were watching me, observing me, or sitting next to me. Sometimes I prefer to simply work somewhere else. And when I had the opportunity to speak about my experiences at a gathering, I did so, not knowing that others could be interested. A journalist approached me and asked for an interview, so I accepted his invitation. It were nothing than during the interview I showed him my notes on what was happening, and my statements caused a stir, not only in the region, but throughout the country, since no one with a religious background had ever deliberately acknowledged these events, let alone made them public. So, yes, ghosts and we coexist in this world. And it is likely that when I depart from this world, if I do not attain eternal rest, I may end up keeping them company and being part of that spectral community for all eternity. In my country, Bolivia, like in many other South American countries, there are so many legends and stories that remain deeply rooted in the land, traditions that are still with us today, thanks to our respect for them. Something I need to tell you is that I come from another region from Bolivia, very close to La Paz, but I moved to Oruro for work. However, things got complicated and I lost my job. Once in Oruro, I was desperate and took up mining. Although it was difficult at first, I met Sammy, a good man whom I thank for taking me like a son and teaching me the trade. Here, an offering is made on the first Friday of every month to El Tío, a deity who is honored here in Oruro and in Potosí. He is the protector of us, miners, and we must make him a chaya and offer him liquor, cigars, and coca leaves. During the festival and carnivals, offerings are even more generous because if we don't make the offerings properly, El Tío might get angry, hide the minerals in the mine, or make things go even worse than you could ever imagine. Not to mention that women aren't allowed in the mine. I witnessed his anger firsthand when I first arrived. A new foreign company was in charge of the mine, and its working conditions and pay were better than those of other companies. The company mined silver, tin, gold, copper, and antimony, among other minerals. However, the company hired women. The other miners, along with the supervisor, who were all from the area, asked the Human Resources Department that if they wanted to hire women, they should find other position for them, but not allow them into the mines. They suggested good jobs, thought but interesting, and most importantly, ones that were above ground. They asked to perform the chaya, but were only allowed to do a simple version, although some people commented that a more elaborate one was necessary given the occasion. When they saw the female miners arrive, everyone got nervous. Of course, I didn't understand what was happening or why. Sammy had even warned them that he would teach them any skill as long as they asked to be transferred to an external site, insisting it was for their own good, to which they flatly refused, saying it was their way of contributing and that the world needed to leave some traditions behind. That was when I heard it from the first time. Pachamama will get jealous. The uncle will fall in love with you, and you might get lost inside the mine or die there. Well, too bad. Let Pachamama understand that we need to work. We'll ask her permission to enter. We have needs too. So, we spent 2 weeks working in fear, but no avail. There were almost no materials to extract. Suddenly, it was a cave-in in just a small area of the mine. I barely made it out, but the female miners didn't make it. After the cave-in, it took them 8 hours to complete the rescue. In total, there were 10 injured and 2 dead. The female miners, in fact. Those of us who were injured were recovered in the hospital, in my case, for 2 weeks, just as I returned along with some of the other injured. It happened to be the first Friday of the following month. This time, they brought more offerings to El Tío, prepared the chaya, and it asked for protection and forgiveness for the carelessness from the previous month, as well as asking for his favor and help. Within a few days, things started to go well for us in the mines. We began to find materials. We didn't have any more cave-ins. Not to mention that since then, we've never failed to offer chayas to El Tío and Pachamama. Sometimes there are traditions that are the best left behind, while others have their own reason for being and existing, leading us to live in the midst of both worlds and to be mindful of and heed the traditions and customs of our lands.